Hello everyone, welcome to The Green Man. Hope you're all doing good and well and you're ready for a Megadeth tier list. I mean, this has been quite a long time coming. I've been thinking of doing a Megadeth on the channel almost since its inception, but I'm finally here. This, taking a bit more time has given me an opportunity to revisit all these Megadeth albums, in particular the ones I knew a bit less, which are all their middle era albums. I would say everything between Cryptic Writings right through to United Abominations, those sorts of albums I didn't know quite as well, and I wanted to give them a good chance before I cast judgment on them and cast them into one of these tiers on this tier list in front of me. So they have 16 studio albums to their name. I think Megadeth are a pretty consistent band. There are at least mostly decent albums here. A few classics and maybe a couple of albums which, I'm not quite as big on. And you may see those albums, of course, going into the bottom tier. If you're not familiar with tier list, there are 5 tiers here. From the very top we have S, and we work our way down to the bottom, which is the D tier, which will be my least favourite albums. That's the idea. It's like a ranking, but you have certain items within each tier instead of a precise ranking order as such. So let's name the tiers this time, make this a little bit more fun perhaps. I'm going to call the top tier Holy Wars, which maybe gives a bit of a clue as to one of the albums I'm going to put in there. What should we go for the next one? I guess Great. We'll have this one as Good. C. I guess it's the kind of meh tier, I don't necessarily think the album's a bad album, so I'm going to put meh, Megadeth for that tier. And then the bottom tier we will have Mega Dud. Right, so let's crack on with the tier list then. So let's get these into tiers, these albums. So we're going to go with, we've got Risk here first up. Risk. I don't think this is terrible, but it's still, to my mind, definitely one of the weaker albums out of their catalogue. Listening to it again, there wasn't much for me to latch onto, and I didn't even though this is one of their more, how can I put it, commercial type of albums, there was still things missing from this album for me that meant it felt a little bit messy as well in its different styles in the tracks. And I quite liked Prince of Darkness towards the end of that track. 7 was quite a good one, but most of the tracks here I think are not that great for me. So I think Risk is the first one actually that's going to go into Mega Dud. If you like Risk, I know JC likes Risk, sorry JC, but I am putting Risk into the bottom tier. Now next up we haven't, I should say these albums aren't in chronological order, but that kind of is deliberate from me because I kind of want to keep things interesting and not make it sort of too predictable. Next up we have Cryptic Writings, and that was the album I discussed with JC just the other day as a Dark Horse album. I think this is good. Not great, not Holy Wars level, but I do think it's a very solid album, a bit of a dark horse. I think the songs are all good, I think the songwriting's good. A few great moments and a couple of really great deep cuts which we identified in our collab. The likes, I said I like the likes of Sin. You've got Vortex. The singles are very good as well. So I think Cryptic Writings is going to be good for me. Now, next up, one of the classics. I don't really think that... I think it's better than Great, Countdown to Extinction. I think it's a really strong album. Lots of really great songs, and defining songs for Megadeth, like Symphony of Destruction. Psychotron is one of my favourite deeper cuts on here. Great song with an absolutely fantastic Megadeth groove. They when they do the groove, that Megadeth style groove, you can't go too far wrong for me. And when they do that style, I think, like they do with Symphony of Destruction, Psychotron, Sweating Bullets, of course, too. Really good song. Next up we have Endgame. Another really strong album actually, and this is a tricky one actually, because for me it's probably somewhere between Holy Wars and Great. A lot of people would stick it into Holy Wars, probably into S tier. the thing is with me is it is the closest thing in terms of one of the more recent Megadeth albums we've had to Rust in Peace. It's pretty close to Rust in Peace. Well, in terms of, I think, the ambitiousness of the album, it is like, if you're looking for something from their recent albums that is close to Rust in Peace, this is the closest you're going to get. I still don't think that it's, there's something missing still for me on Endgame that makes it not quite reach S tier. Maybe it's a little bit of the songwriting aspect. I think the instrumentals on Endgame are superb, and it's just some of the best guitar work from Megadeth in a while, up to the point of that album being released, I think. So Endgame's a really good album, no questions asked. So it's going into great. Next up we have Killing Is My Business. I think that this was pretty good, actually. I'm torn between, I don't think I can call it meh. Simply because it has a lot of great moments in it. I really like Skull Beneath the Skin, the way that starts. It's just brilliant. Love to death. Amazing introduction to the album, actually. Really like that introduction. It just gets you stoked and hyped for the rest of the album. Looking Down the Cross, I think it is, I like. So I think there's quite a lot of good stuff on here. The problem for me is it's very raw as an album, and I think that it shows, that Dave is kind of early on in his songwriting. Maybe it doesn't feel very well developed as an album. There's a lot of good riffs, but as an album as a whole, it doesn't feel particularly well developed for me, this one. Production's kind of, it was the first Megadeth album, but I don't think that was that great either. I'm going to put it into good, behind Cryptic Writings there. Peace Sells. Great album. It's, I kind of wanted to put it into Holy Wars, and there's a part of me that thinks, well, actually, I tell you what, the first half of this album is phenomenal, because you've got Wake Up Dead, The Conjuring, followed by Peace Sells, the title track, Devil's Island. For me, the first half is an absolutely brilliant Megadeth display. Black Morning, Good Friday is pretty good as well. After that, doesn't quite, I don't know if I can quite even put this. I've got to be honest with myself with all of these albums. And I've always thought this is my second or third album, but when I'm putting myself on the spot and having revisited all of these again, I think the question is, does it beat Endgame as well? And, I think maybe it does, because I would even now, much as I like Endgame, I think I'd still go back to Peace Sells more. So Peace Sells is just going to edge out Endgame at the top of great tier here. It might be a bit controversial, but, this is what this is all about. It's just having a bit of fun, sharing our love of these bands. Next up, we got So Far, So Good, So What? Well, another difficult one to place, because this is also great. Probably not quite S tier, to be honest. There's some classics on here. The Darkest Hour track. Mary Jane. Mary Jane is probably one of my top 5, top 10 maybe Megadeth tracks. Say top 5, probably top 10 Megadeth tracks, that one. Fantastic track. I love the cover of Anarchy in the UK on here, actually. I think that's great. One of the best covers, one of my favourite covers from a metal band, I think, on this album. I think I'm going to have it there. I think I'm going to have it on the great tier again. And what do we have next? We have an interesting one here up next. The System Has Failed. System Has Failed. On rediscovering this one and revisiting it, I realised actually this is really quite good. And after 3 albums that came before, which I thought were pretty, okay, or, what we're calling on here mega duds, I suppose, for the purposes of the list, but this was good. This was a good album. Starts off with Blackmail the Universe. There's Kick the Chair. Some really good stuff on here, and I think it's one of their dark horses again, like Cryptic Writings, but I actually think this is really underrated, this album. I'm going to put it just above Cryptic Writings in good. I think it's a really good album. Almost tempted to put it in great, actually, but yeah. This was like a return to form for me, for Megadeth. The System Has Failed. Real return to form, which set them, I think, on the path to other good albums, which I'm going to come on to shortly. Now, Euthanasia. On listening to this again, this is a really strong album. One of their, for me, it's still in there, just about in their classic era, still with that classic lineup of Megadeth. You know, the two Daves, Marty and Nick on drums, and I think it's a really great album. Is it better than Endgame and Peace Souls? I don't know. I think it's probably better than. It's difficult because I've loved So Far So Good So What for such a long time, and I have a nostalgia attached to that album, and yet on revisiting all of these, I've just got to be strict. Basically I'm doing this more with my head than my heart, I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, I'm putting Euthanasia pretty high there in great. I think it's a great album. And actually the second half of Euthanasia, I've written down a few tracks here which I love on there. Blood of Heroes, Family Tree, what a cracking song, another maybe top 10 track for me. I Thought I Knew It All, another really good one. Lots of stuff stacked on the second half of that album. It's really, really good. What next have we got? Dystopia. This is slightly different. This is like the first half of this, I think, is really good. Towards the end, it loses for me a bit of the bite of the earlier part of the album. Divides opinion a lot. A lot of, I see some YouTubers who really hate on this album, and now the YouTubers who really enjoy it. And I'm on the latter side. I like Dystopia a lot. I enjoyed it when it came out. It was on my top 20 list of that year, 2016. You can watch that video as well. It's on my channel. So I think this one, is it better than My System Has Failed? I think I'd put it above Cryptic Writings. But on revisiting The System Has Failed, I'm not sure it's better than that. I'm going to have it on the good tier though. Dystopia, good album. Just a solid album. Next up, Super Collider. There we go. Actually, to be fair to Super Collider, right, on revisiting it, it has a couple of pretty cool songs like Kingmaker and Forget to Remember, but there's just a lot of, I don't know, it all sounds like the way the album was put together wasn't really done with the same kind of level of ambition and effort as a lot of these other Megadeth albums. I think it's a little on the dull side for me. But it's not a terrible album, but it does go into Megadub tier for the purposes of this tier list. I'm being tough. Now, this is where my most hot take on this, though, probably comes next for Megadeth fans, because the newest album, a lot of people really enjoyed the newest album. I was a bit lukewarm towards it in my review. I did give it a 7 out of 10. But even now, a few weeks later, having had a bit more time with it, I'm still not quite there with this. I don't know. There's 3 or 4 tracks I enjoy. If you want to know what those are, I think I would probably say Dogs of Chernobyl, Will Be Back, the single I thought was great. That got my hopes up pretty high for this album. And I liked Junkie. It's a little bit kind of cheesy, but I enjoyed that track. I honestly think, overall though, stacked up against a lot of these heavyweights up here, I wasn't that keen on it. So it's going to go into Megadeth, which is I'm going to get some angry people. I know that's inevitable with these kind of things, but yeah, this is how it goes. I just didn't dig it. I'm sorry if you love this album, that's cool. It's absolutely fine. It's just for me, it wasn't so much for me, the new album. So next up we have 13. For me, I liked this when this came out though. It's one which my love of has faded over time quite a bit. So I think that's another Megadeth album for me. Not much on here that I go back to. I think I do like Public Enemy No. 1 a lot. Very catchy song. There's a few catchy tracks on this one actually. I like Deadly Nightshade towards the end on this one too. It's another good track, but I don't know, the rest of it I've liked less over the years, I think, to be honest, with 13. Now we get on to just Rust in Peace. I don't even feel like any explanation is required for Rust in Peace. If you're a Megadeth fan, I haven't met a Megadeth fan that says they don't like Rust in Peace. If you're a Megadeth fan and you don't like Rust in Peace, I don't know. That doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right to me. What a fantastic album! What a classic album! Every track on there is pretty much an ace. The way the album starts with Holy Wars is... I get goosebumps listening to that track for the 100th time, or the 200th time, how many times I've listened to it. Still get goosebumps now. And I remember when it first kind of clicked with me, that track. I think I was just in the supermarket at university doing some shopping. It was just something really trivial like that. And I was just like, wow, what is this, you know? Next up, United Abominations. Now, this hasn't quite... I honestly... I don't know. This one is well respected in their discography by a lot of fans, and I do respect it, but I don't know, going back to it, if I like it as much. It feels a bit harsh to call it Megadeth, because I do think there's some good stuff on here that I preferred to the albums in the lower tiers, I think. Sleepwalker's a great track, the opening track. I love Gears of War, American. I think it's good, but actually these other albums here are more likely to listen to the United Abominations. My justification for this one isn't quite... I don't know. I just don't really find that there are many songs on this album that really stick with me on United Abominations. After the revisits as well, it's just, sadly, United Abominations. Still good. Still not going to, throw it into the lower tiers, but it's just less for me, I think, overall. The World Needs a Hero has some good moments on, actually, but it is kind of meh overall. I want to give a shout out to a couple of tracks on here that I really like. Dread and the Fugitive Mind, and Recipe for Hate, Warhorse gets really good as it develops. So it's meh, but it's not terrible. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this tier list. Do let me know. I know these kind of things, they can create lots of debates and discussion. That's absolutely fine. Do drop your own rankings in the comments, or maybe your top 5 albums, maybe your least favourite albums, I don't know. However you want to do it, just drop in the comments your thoughts on this one. I hope you all enjoyed the video anyway and enjoyed the premiere. Otherwise, from me, take care everybody. Bye for now.